We're going to move on to our next presentation. How do educators' reflections on problem solving inform our understanding of teaching problem solving? And we've got Anna Duff from Ontario Tech University, Kseniya Garaschuk from the University of Fraser Valley, and Lynn Pacarynuk from Ottawa-Carleton District School Board. Just some quick bios. Anna Duff is from Ontario Tech University, whose work bridges research and practice to help educators develop systematic frameworks for teaching problem solving. Joining her is Dr. Kseniya Garaschuk of the University of the Fraser Valley, a mathematician and educator passionate about uncovering the deeper connections between problem-solving techniques and effective pedagogy. Lynn Pacarynuk is a dedicated educator from the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board, bringing a wealth of classroom experience to the discussion of how teachers' own problem-solving practices shape their instructional strategies. Together, Anne, Kseniya, and Lynn will share insights from their recent study, which examines the reflections of educators participating in problem-solving workshops. They'll address key themes such as the role of familiarity in problem selection, challenges in solving complex problems, and strategies for scaffolding problem-solving skills in the classroom. I'll turn it over to Anna, Kseniya, and Lynn, and hopefully you have the opportunity or the ability to share. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Anna. Joining me is Lynn, and I think Kseniya I think Kseniya actually will not be able to join us today. So Lynn and I will be there, but Kseniya is going to be really interested in your feedback as well. So I'll share the slides, and while I'm sharing the slides, maybe I'm going to have Lynn introduce herself.
Thank you. Well, and Paul, you and your team made a fabulous introductory slide already, so thanks very much. But yes, I do come from the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board, a longtime secondary math teacher. I'm currently in the role of a vice principal, but still very connected to the world of math education, and very happy to be here today.
Yes, I would also like to thank you for the invitation to continue this conversation following the CMS meeting. I'm Anna Duff. I teach at Ontario Tech University, primarily first-year students in the Faculty of Business and IT. And I apologize for my voice. It's the end of the term. So hopefully it's not going to escape me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start us off, and then Lynn and I are going to be talking interchangeably. What we wanted to discuss stems from a quintessential problem of how do we problem solve and how do we teach problem solving. The discussion comes from a discussion paper I wrote back in 2022, and this presentation will draw on our first learnings from the educators who participated in a workshop this summer. The workshop was both teaching and research oriented, and its intent was to investigate educators' problem-solving strategies, teaching problem-solving strategies, and then look at the problem-solving and teaching problem-solving within the context of that framework. This is only the first episode in the series of learnings we have done. So just a little bit about the research study and the workshop. So this research study is primarily delivered through a workshop and then a series of follow-up meetups with the educators. You can see here the list of 5 pieces that were included in the workshop. And the first one was the reflection. So first of all, immersion into a problem-solving scenario, and then reflections from the educators on their experience of doing problem solving. So I am going to just as a summary in the fundamentals. So the first workshop task that the educators were presented was 6 problems. some quantitative, some qualitative, of different sort of levels of complexity. And they were asked to just choose any 3 of the 6 problems to solve. There was no pressure for being correct, but there was a time limit. And then we, in that first section of the workshop, followed up with 3 questions. We asked our participants to share their own experience in solving these problems, then to reflect on what their perception is of how they, in general, approach problem solving. And then finally, to have them reflect now on what their thoughts were about their general practice in problem solving and how that actually reflected in the practice that they just did. So I'm going to pass it on to Lynn to take us further.
Okay, so giving a summary of the responses. So thinking, going through that first question, thinking back at your decision-making process as you were choosing which problems to tackle, what do you remember as having an influence on your problem-solving selection? The overriding answer was whether or not the question had mathematics or not. So they used the word math specifically, but we kind of generalize that as more of a preference for quantitative versus the qualitative. We did, because we had a variety of participants, we did have a couple of participants who said that they were looking at the math content as something to avoid solving that particular problem. They also perceived that they were looking at the problems that they could actually do, that they had some familiarity or comfort level with, some prior knowledge with, as being helpful in their starting point. And then there were other things that came out that were not highly present, but a couple of participants talked about whether or not the problem looked challenging or interesting, or whether or not it looked really complex in terms of what they wanted to do. So so I'll go to the next slide. And then the question, what did you find easy in how you approached solving your chosen problems? So they found the ability to organize and plan. They used words like step by step. They talked about recalling processes. They also commented on the presence of data, the ability to sort the data. They talked a lot about the ability to do calculations as being easy. And then a few participants did like the fact that they felt that they didn't have a pressure to be correct. They liked that they were provided with open amounts of paper to engage in some free thinking about it as well. Next slide. And then the counter question to that, what did you find difficult in how you approached solving your chosen problems? So they commented on feeling a sense of uncertainty about the data, that they had to rely on assumptions and they had to make some interpretations, that they had some challenges figuring out how to organize the information. Other people talked about the not being interested. Time pressure came up a little bit, and concerns again over simultaneously making simultaneous choices about the steps that they had to make. Next slide. So just a summary of some of the themes or things that we noticed, that in general, the participants chose problems that were familiar and comfortable for them, and that what they found easy was the ability to create steps, to break it down, to apply a logic or an algorithmic process. And what they found hard was the fact that they weren't sure about the kinds of assumptions to make, the uncertainty, and that they were lacking some information and how to organize their thoughts. And we did think this was kind of interesting. Again, we kind of want you to think that we have gathered this group of participants at the workshop were participants that you might consider to be, quote unquote, more on the expert side of in terms of problem solving. So just keeping that in the back of our minds as we're noticing what their own preferences were, even though they have this status as being more experienced problem solvers themselves. Okay, and I think Anna, next slide is to you.
Okay, so the next question that was asked was to consider what the participants think about their own problem solving in general. So the first question we asked is, out of the blue, do you believe that you're good at problem solving? And the vast majority said, yeah, I think so. Okay. There were very few who expressed a really sort of strong sense of being able to, at the inability of problem solving, and some were ambivalent. So this was a little bit of an interesting aspect, and that we would like to sort of explore a lot more. And then the educators were asked about their sort of sense of what they feel like when they're asked to solve a problem. The responses varied, but we were able to sort of put them on a graph from panic to excitement. Okay, and so and it's interesting to note that in multiple cases, both of the sort of senses were at play. So both being excited about the problem and tackling it, but a sense of apprehension as well. So the word excited, happy, actually came out the most. And then some of that sort of sense of being comfortable, being confident about being able to solve the problem also came out, but there was some sense of worry, hesitation, and then as well the fear of failure and pressure in completing the problems. Then we asked the question in general context, so separate from their experience of solving those particular problems. In general, what do you find easy about solving problems? And some of the themes that are emerged, and these are actually, when I'm saying themes, we are here using the participants' words, okay? So many mentioned use of prior knowledge, the ability to recall algorithms, or having some sort of frames for the problems they were facing was what they found easy. And then also the ability to explore different pathways, whether step-by-step approach or sort of as different pathway solutions. And then we also asked what kind of problems they find easy in the general context of the problems. And this was a little bit not surprising answer, because the majority of the educators were educators in a math fields or math-related fields. Most sort of stated, quantitative. They mentioned the words math or algebra or algorithms, as well as problems that were familiar, or the participant anticipated that they had a definite answer. On the flip side, when on the question of which problems in general they found difficult, so a little bit of a repetition of a theme before, so a lack of clarity. So in other words, unclear data, uncertain about the goal, not sure about the approach, time management, so worry about are they going to be able to complete it in time, and the concern about correctness were the most common sort of words that arose. And then in terms of what kinds of problems they find difficult. They mentioned open-ended problems, unclear, unfamiliar, and also amongst some of the participants, when they do see math or quantitative, that sort of sets it up as a difficult. And then finally, in this particular portion of the workshop, we asked the question, how do you typically approach solving a problem? What is the first thing you do? And then the words that are very, very sort of like these were the most common words that emerged: read and reread the problem, looking for key information, and creating steps. I'm going to pass it on back to Lynn.
Okay, so in general, what we noticed is that what educators find easy about problem solving is that the doing part is the easiest when the structure is clear and algorithmic. Again, that's probably not very surprising. And what do they find hard about solving problems are the fact that they are open-ended, ones that are more open-ended, that they are having trouble finding a structure, that there's some uncertainty, again, about the process or the goals, and how to communicate whatever the solution is. So thinking through those two sides came up quite a bit. And the next slide. So then we asked them, we were to reflect on this kind of comparison between these specific problems that we asked them to solve, and then when they think in general about how they solve problems, what were some of the, how did they approach that? And we need to explore this one a little bit more. We think perhaps the participants perhaps slightly misinterpreted the question. So that happens in research. We're going to revisit that. But what we did try to do was look at the words that kept coming up in their answers. So we asked them to look back at your problem-solving processes while you were solving your chosen problems. How do they compare to what you identified as your current general approach to problem solving? And specifically, they were thinking about the problems that they did choose to solve versus the problems that they avoided solving. And so the words that you see there actually came up in either scenarios. So participants talked about how important it was to be able to get to see key ideas and have access to key information. That being able to see through the organization of the solution was important. Again, whether they could see a way to organize and so chose to do the problem, or couldn't see a good way to organize and therefore chose not to do the problem. Interestingly, in this part of the reflection, participants talked quite a lot about time and time management, which they hadn't talked significantly about earlier. It seemed that having some of the time pressure really did factor into their decision making when they were doing their problem solving. And then a lot of words that they used to describe their problem solving process. And again, some people use the words reading and reflecting more frequently, and other participants use the words thinking and brainstorming. They might mean the same thing, but different participants chose different pairings of words. So we distinguished between those two. And what was quite interesting was participants did also speak directly to thinking in terms of teaching mode. So they thought of solving problems like they were creating a test for students. So that was just an interesting observation of maybe some teachers were not able, some educators were not able to take themselves out of teaching mode when they were reflecting on their problem solving process. So we want to explore that part a little bit more as well. And then, am I doing the next one, Anna, I think?
I think so.
Okay, all right. So some other things that came up. So in choosing which problems to tackle, we tried to keep it incredibly open. So there was these 6 problems, they can pick any 3 of them. Interestingly, most chose to start with the first problem. So almost everybody did the first problem that was listed. So whether or not it seemed to be a good problem to solve, they mostly started with that one. And then we're curious about, when did that sense of time pressure kick in? Again, they didn't talk about it the first time that they were reflecting on their problem solving process, but it did come up when they continued to reflect later on in the process. And then another thing that came up was really this definition of math, because they use the word math to mean we think quite a number of things. That, doing the math, like, are they talking about the algorithms? Are they talking about the actual calculations that they're doing? Or are they thinking about the fact of math being a broader concept of concepts and relationships? And it made us think about the language that we use when we talk about problem solving, both as doers of problems versus teachers of problem solving. So, how are we interpreting that word math? Are we thinking about the procedural, or are we thinking about the conceptual, broader concepts of math? So those are things to continue to explore. Anna?
And so now we come to the end of our presentation today, and to give you a teaser. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation today, the workshop had multiple sessions within it. It was a 2.5-day, very intense workshop. Our second session, so following in the reflections on the current problem-solving practices, we focused on questions regarding teaching problem solving. So you can see here as a teaser the questions that we asked the participants in the follow-up session, and we hope to be presenting on our learning from those responses in some future presentations. I'm going to give you a minute maybe to read these in peace and quiet, and then I'm going to wrap us up. Okay, so I'm going to turn the tables now to you. So we are curious about your thoughts on the following questions. So for example, what are you thinking now about your own problem-solving practice? How do you think it relates to how you teach problem solving? And then finally, what questions would you want to ask our workshop participants if you were there? I don't know how much time we have. I'm looking at the time. I think we are right about 20 minutes. So we might, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share in the chat a short survey where you can give us some feedback to those questions an hour later, if you can keep it. And I will also share in the chat a link to the underlying discussion paper on the problem solving practice. But I want to thank you all for listening to us, and also looking forward to your questions.
Thanks, Anna. And thanks, Lynn. Because the one thing I thought as we were going through is like, ask 10 math teachers, what is problem solving? I think you're going to get 10 different definitions of problem solving. Because that's what the first thing I thought of as, I teach at the secondary level. And I thought, when we think of problem solving, I think sometimes I don't know what the answers I'm going to get. And I wonder if that was something you experienced as well from your participants, is this definition, and if it was very amorphous or ambiguous, what does it mean to problem solve, and the impact that will then have on the way you teach problem solving. So I don't know if you want to just generally comment on that, and then we can move on to the next one. Go ahead, please.
If I can say a quotation from one of our workshop participants that really stopped us in our tracks was, a comment that we don't teach problem solving, we teach pattern recognition. And so that made me really, yeah, that's an interesting reflection. And what does that mean? What do we do with that if that is in fact what we're doing? And is that what we want to be doing? And yeah, so that was definitely one comment that we were spending some time thinking about during the workshop. Anna?
Yeah, so I'm going to say, like, it was a curious, I had some curious thoughts after the CMS presentation, because one of the participants asked if we would be able to ask at the end of the workshop, or at the end of sort of the research, the participants about how they feel now about problem solving and teaching problem solving. And then in conjunction with comments from another participant who mentioned the importance of words and being able to parse words in the problems. And as I was walking away, this is exactly what happened. I was walking away across the parking lot, and I'm going like, oh, what was the question? What was the exact wording of the question? Are you good at problem solving, or was it, are you good at solving problems? And then as I was thinking about that, I was thinking, there's Zach. Okay. I was thinking, wait a minute, but I don't know if I would answer those two questions, although they sound like the same questions. I don't know if I would answer them differently or the same. Are you good at problem solving versus are you good at solving problems? So that is one of the things that I would like to sort of continue to unpack from that. I don't know if that is helpful to address your question.
No, for sure. Thanks, Anna. Absolutely. Yeah, I think, yeah, it's lots of things are kind of ringing true. I do want to move on as well and honor the next presentation.